Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Alexander Thorne had it all: wealth, power, and control until one unexpected visit to a shelter shattered the illusion. A donation trip meant to polish his image turns into a life-altering encounter when he comes face to face with Camila, the woman he once loved, and the baby he never knew existed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. The engine of Alexander Thorne's sleek RDR8 purred to a gentle stop in front of a modest shelter tucked away on the city's outskirts. The car, polished to perfection, contrasted sharply with the building in front of him. It was the kind of place Alexander didn't usually find himself near, much less inside. Dressed in his sharp, tailored Italian suit, he gazed through the windshield at the shelter, his thoughts distant. It wasn't the type of place he typically visited. Still, the board of directors had insisted he handle the delivery of a substantial donation, a gesture meant to boost his company's image. It was a quick, easy task. Make the donation, sign a few papers, and head back to his office for a video conference with European investors. He'd be in and out, all in a day's work. As two employees unloaded boxes from the trunk, Alexander checked his gold watch. Just 5 minutes, that was all he needed. Then, he'd be back on track, in front of his computer, finalizing deals. The shelter, with its sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with stale coffee, felt worlds apart from his polished high-end world. A volunteer, an older woman, led him down a narrow hallway, explaining the various services the shelter provided. For vulnerable mothers, Alexander nodded absently, barely registering her words as his phone buzzed constantly in his pocket, demanding his attention. "Mr. Thorne, this way," she called out, guiding him toward the common room where the director was waiting. As he entered the room, everything seemed to pause. A sense of disbelief washed over him. Among the women cradling babies, his eyes locked onto a familiar face, her auburn hair carelessly tied back in a messy ponytail, and her honey-colored eyes struck him like a bolt of lightning. Camilla. She saw him, too. Her face immediately paled, and in an instinctive motion she clutched the baby tightly against her chest. A newborn, Alexander noticed, his heart suddenly skipping a beat. But it wasn't just any baby. A chill swept over him as he noticed the tiny features on the infant's face, the mole under the right eye mole he knew all too well. His father had it. His grandfather had it. It was a mark passed down through generations. "Mr. Thorne." The director's voice seemed to come from a distance, muffled by the storm of thoughts racing through Alexander's mind. Alexander didn't respond. His gaze fixed on Camila, who was now trying to slip away, her movements hurried, her eyes wide. With panic, "Camila, wait," he called out, his voice low but firm. She froze. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn around. The baby let out a soft, desperate whimper, and it felt like the world held its breath. "When were you planning to tell me?" The words tumbled from his lips, heavy with raw emotion, frustration, and confusion. The room around them seemed to dissolve as the other women, sensing the tension, quietly retreated to the corners of the room. The director, reading the atmosphere, followed suit, leaving Alexander and Camila alone in the space. Camila finally turned to face him. Her eyes were glistening with unshed tears. "Alexander, is he mine?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The question hung in the air, unnecessary yet crucial. The resemblance was undeniable, but Alexander needed to hear it from her. Her answer was a whisper. "His name is Samuel. He's 3 weeks old." A sudden rush of emotions flooded over Alexander as he took a step toward them. But as he did, Camila recoiled instinctively, pulling Samuel closer to her chest. It felt like a slap in the face. "Why?" The word slipped out, filled with years of hurt and unanswered questions. "Why did you disappear, Camila? Why hide this from me?" A lone tear rolled down her cheek. "It's not all as it seems, Alexander. There are things you don't know." But before she could continue, the soft cries of Samuel interrupted her. His tiny, desperate whimpers filled the room. Camila, ever the protective mother, began to rock him gently, her gaze never leaving Alexander's face. "Don't you dare leave again." Alexander's voice softened but remained resolute. "This time, I won't let you disappear. Not without explanations." The air around them seemed to hum with unspoken words, with hidden truths, both painful and necessary to uncover. As Samuel slowly calmed in his mother's arms, Alexander knew one thing for certain: the answers he sought couldn't wait. "All right," Camila finally conceded, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had just fallen on them. "But not here. Not like this." Alexander nodded, his resolve hardening. He took out his phone and immediately cancelled all his meetings for the rest of the day. Nothing else mattered now. Both of their worlds had just been irrevocably changed, and the answers could not wait another minute. It was late afternoon when Alexander found himself sitting at a small, quiet coffee shop near the shelter. The place was nearly empty, offering them the privacy they needed. Camila sat across from him, Samuel resting peacefully in his car seat beside her. "Coffee, please." "Black," Alexander ordered, his voice low. "Camila, water is fine." The waitress nodded and left them in silence. Camila seemed exhausted, her shoulders slumped, her eyes carrying the weight of the conversation ahead. Alexander couldn't tear his eyes away from Samuel, who lay sleeping innocently, unaware of the tension between his parents. It was surreal. To think that only an hour ago, Alexander's biggest concern had been the video conference with investors. Now, here he was, face to face with a child he never knew existed. He cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. "Why the shelter?" he asked, carefully sidestepping the deeper questions for the moment. Camila nervously twisted the napkin in her hands. "I volunteer there," she said softly. "I help other mothers, teach them about baby care, legal procedures." Her voice trailed off as if she had said too much. "And you live nearby?" Alexander asked, his voice tight. "Yeah, it's not much, but it's enough for us." She didn't look up, her words heavy with resignation. Alexander's chest tightened. The thought of his son growing up in these circumstances, when he could have provided them with everything, hit him like a ton of bricks. His fists clenched under the table as frustration bubbled up. "I tried to contact you," Camila continued, breaking his train of thought, "when I found out I was pregnant." "Oh, really?" The irony in his voice was sharp, almost bitter. "And what happened? Because as far as I know, you just disappeared one day. No explanations, no note, nothing." Samuel stirred in his sleep, his small movements making both parents hold their breath until he settled again. Camila looked up at him, her eyes filled with something more than fear. There was pain, and there was anger. "Eleanor," she whispered. The name dropped between them like a bomb. Eleanor, his ex-fiancée, the woman Alexander had tried to rebuild his life with after Camila vanished. Or so he had thought. "What does Eleanor have to do with any of this?" Alexander asked, his confusion deepening. "She intercepted me," Camila continued, her voice trembling with the weight of the truth. "The day I was going to your office to tell you about the pregnancy." Alexander's breath caught in his throat. "She showed me photos of you two together, told me you were engaged, that you were already planning the wedding." Alexander leaned forward, the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. "But that was after you left." "No." Camila shook her head. "Not according to the dates on the photos." With a trembling hand, she pulled out her phone, swiping through a few images before handing it to him. "Look at the date on the newspaper Eleanor is holding in this engagement photo." Alexander's heart sank as he took the phone. The date in the newspaper was 3 months before Camila disappeared. His stomach twisted as he realized the implications. This isn't possible," he muttered. "I never." She also had messages. "Emails." Camila's voice trembled as she continued. "She told me that if I dared to come back into your life with a baby, she'd destroy my career, my reputation. She had the means, the contacts." Alexander rubbed his face, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. How had he been so blind? How had he missed all of this? "There's more," Camila said softly, her gaze fixed on Samuel, still peacefully sleeping in his car seat. "But I think that's enough for today." Alexander nodded, his mind racing. This was just the beginning. He had to know everything, and no matter the cost, he would find out the truth. How Camila turned out was something we could have dealt with jointly. "You loved her, or so I thought, because her eyes were full of unshed tears. Every newspaper and magazine featured your happiness together as a prosperous businessman and the ideal." Alexander looked down at Samuel, who was starting to nod off in his arms. "I never loved her. It was a last-ditch effort to get over losing you. Now, Alexander, what do you want?" "I want to be a part of his life," he said without hesitation to the question that lingered between them like a storm cloud. "Of both your lives, if you'll allow me to." "I know," Alexander said cautiously, "but it's not that easy. Ascending while keeping Samuel beside me, but for the first time in a long time, I am certain." "What do you think of Camila's justification for not fighting for what she wants?" "I'll do whatever it takes to acquire it." "Alexander, does her dread make sense?" Let us know what you think in part 4 below. Alexander's office was hushed as he revealed Elena's plan, carefully went through the files on his computer. It was 3 a.m., yet he felt tired. The last thing he thought of was that dozens of old emails on the screen showed a terrible reality. Mr. Thorne, his assistant Mark, came in carrying a document. I discovered the security records from the previous year, and Alexander grasped the folder with shaking hands. Camera footage verified Camilla's account. She had made 3 attempts to visit him that month, and each time Eleanor had effectively blocked her entry by intercepting her in the foyer. Is there anything else I should know, Mark? Eleanor used to ask me to screen your calls and messages, saying that you were under a lot of stress. The assistant pondered for a second, and had to concentrate on work, but you never considered telling me about it. She was your fiancée, sir, so I figured that. Mark faded off uneasy. I regret not questioning it sooner. Exhausted, Alexander reclined in his chair. The puzzle pieces were finally falling into place. The unanswered texts, the missed calls that Camilla was held at bay by planned coincidences. His phone vibrated as a message appeared. Camilla, Samuel has a temperature, but it's nothing severe, but he's restless. Alexander immediately grabbed his jacket and said, "Cancel my meetings for tomorrow, Mark." When he got to Camilla's flat, it was dark. She opened the door while holding Samuel, a wailing infant. The words still seemed odd. "Even though you didn't have to come to me, I'm his father," on his lips. "But what does the doctor say?" "I gave him a cold. The medication, but he refuses to go to sleep." Camilla let Alexander in. He extended his arms, and Camilla reluctantly handed the infant to him. "Samuel." I discovered evidence of Alexander. His tiny body, heated with fever, tucked against his chest, rocked Samuel gently while he talked about what Eleanor had done, including the emails. Camilla reclined on the sofa, weary by the threats and images that had been altered. "It doesn't matter anymore, but Alexander's powerful voice does matter, since it indicates that you never gave up on us, and I was too blind to notice it." At last, Samuel started to fall asleep, his breathing regularizing, and Alexander carefully placed him in his "What are we going to do now?" Kat said, observing his tiny chest rise and fall from the bedroom doorway. Camilla murmured, and Alexander turned to face her with a gleam of resolve in his eyes. "We will make up for lost time if you allow me to." "How do you believe Alexander will approach Eleanor? What does make up for lost time for him and Camilla? By sharing your guesses in the section below." 5. Breaking free. Liam Vance, Alexander's attorney, was a shrewd strongman. Mark Stone, who has a sophisticated office with a view of the city's financial area, having spent decades managing the Thorne family's legal matters, listened carefully as Alexander described the terrible circumstances. "Do you realize how serious this scenario is? Of these charges?" Liam inquired, adjusting his glasses while looking over the papers strewn all over his desk. "Because of her family's strong ties, Eleanor Thorne is not just any person." Alexander got up, unable to control his untamed enthusiasm, and didn't care who she was. "It ruined my life, controlled everything, and prevented me from seeing my son." "Camilla," Liam said quietly, and Alexander paused to look out the window at the city. "I need you to prepare everything for the paternity tests," he said, falling beneath him. "Acknowledgement paperwork or anything else required to keep Samuel safe." "And what about Eleanor?" "I want her to cover what when she did." Alexander's eyes glowed with icy resolve. "However, I must first make amends with Camilla." "Who is?" His phone's chime interrupted the conversation with a message from Camilla that included a picture of Samuel grinning while taking a bath. When Alexander saw that naive smile, he melted inside. "I'll help you," Liam said, remarked, starting to arrange the documents, "but you have to be careful." "Eleanor won't." Alexander exited the office with a range of mixed feelings. Sit idly by, anger towards Elena and a deep sense of guilt for not recognizing the signs sooner, desiring to get back what he had lost. A familiar face waited in the parking lot. Elena, near his car, grinned as classy and cunning as ever. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" "Alexander, my love, we don't have much to discuss, yet we do." So Eleanor took a move in his direction. "Do you think Camilla would forgive you so quickly that she won't remember how you left her?" "I didn't." Alexander turned to face her and spoke in a tremulous, controlled rage. "I merely performed what was required, but you made sure to drive her away." Elena kept smiling, but her eyes were icy and unwarm. We may still be beautiful together." "Alexander, you're tired." Alexander took out his phone. "All of the evidence of your actions. This time, you won't be able to control the circumstances." A glimmer of anxiety eventually replaced Eleanor's smile. "Be cautious," is the fact that dirty conflicts invariably result in innocent casualties a threat. Eleanor started to walk away but changed her mind, saying, "Give my regards to little." Alexander's blood ran cold as he heard Eleanor bring up his son's name gave him an anxiety he had never felt before, one that he had to defend. What do you think of Eleanor's final message? His family, no matter the cost. Is Alexander finally in control, or is she a real threat? Please tell us what you think. Alexander brought a little gift package to Camilla's flat downstairs as he waited for the door to open. The sound of a lullaby crept through. Your Samuel was sleeping on Camilla's shoulder as she opened the door, whispering early, brought him something, and Alexander noticed the dark circles beneath Camilla's eyes as he held out the bag. He has been clumsy at night, so Camilla allowed him to go to the baby's room. Alexander slept quietly as he watched her carefully place Samuel in his crib. The mobile over the crib softly rotated, creating gentle animal shadows. Alexander described removing the gift from the bag my father gave me and explaining that it was rattling on the walls. Similar to that, Camilla took the toy in her fingers when I was a child, unintentionally rubbing Alexander. The brief contact sent an electrifying. She put it next to the cot and said, "Thank you." Current between them. She wanted some in the little kitchen. Alexander observed Camilla making 2 cups of coffee. Her motions were robotic, as though she was attempting to preserve an emotional detachment that was gradually breaking down. I spoke to my blowing on his hot coffee. Alexander remarked, about acknowledging legally speaking. Samuel Camilla tensed visibly. There's no need to rush. It's your responsibility not to rush, Camilla. Alexander set down his cup. Alexander found me in the parking lot and warned me about Eleanor. Did you see her? Camilla seemed pale. Don't worry, I've got everything under control. That before her whispering, her tone was sour, but Samuel's sobs cut off the discourse, and Alexander was the first to get up. I'll go. Samuel met him in the room with teary eyes, and Alexander picked him up. Remembering the directions he had read online incessantly regarding how to holding a newborn, he rocked him gently and muttered, "Hey champ, can't sleep." With a start, Samuel started to relax. His small fists gripped Alexander's shirt. "As you have a gift," Camilla whispered from the doorway as his eyes started to close once more. Alexander continued to rock Samuel, her countenance softened by the image before her. "It's like my entire life I've been waiting for this moment." Camilla came over and adjusted the blanket. For a brief while, Alexander could feel the 3 of them close to the infant. "I swear, this time, you can smell the warmth of her body and the delicate perfume of her hair will be different," Camilla muttered in an emotionally charged whisper. As she stared up her for the first time since they were reunited, Alexander's gaze met his hope in them. Part 8. A new journey and a new family. Camilla observed from Alexander and Samuel were playing in the little garden over the shelter window. For the last 2 weeks, he had faithfully shown there every day without fail, spending hours gaining knowledge of every aspect of his son's existence. "He's a good father," Maria said. "You can tell the shelter director is sincerely trying when he approaches with 2 cups of tea. It appears that Camilla has been accepted." The cup, but she never took her eyes off the scene outside. However, Maria gently reminded her, "But every time I see him with Samuel, I'm struck by how similar they are. Camilla, I think of everything we lost because of Eleanor in the garden Alexander had," she said, pausing to swallow a knot in her throat. They laid a blanket down on the lawn and displayed a picture book to Samuel. Rambled as he reached for the vibrant pages, asking, "What if it occurs again?" Camilla's fear was understandable, so I turned to Maria. "What if I trust him and end up making the same mistake?" Dear Maria tenderly squeezed Camilla's shoulder. "Yet it might also turn into a prison." "Did you notice the news?" Lena, her sister Camilla, sent a message on her vibrating phone. "They claim that Alexander is fighting a covered-up scandal, which is why Thorne quit her job at the family business. He's fighting for you too." Maria kept observing Camilla's concern. Statement: forgiveness isn't always just for the other person. It can also be extended to Samuel. Started crying in the garden before Alexander had already lifted Camilla and rocked him with a natural ease that a person who had just met his son seemed incapable of. Camilla whispered as she entered the garden. "Alexander, he needs his nap," said. "I know I recognize this cry now," with a weary smile, their fingertips brushing as Camilla took Samuel, and they remained motionless for a while. If time had stopped, they would have been trapped in a bubble, where the past and its scars were present. Camilla Alexander's voice was kind, almost begging. "Can we talk? Just the 2 of us, without barriers." Fearless, I observed her kid, who had already dozed off in her arms. "I'm not sure if I was." Alexander picked up the blanket in the book, "and I understand that. But I want you to realize that even if Eleanor attempts to demolish it, I won't give up this time. She no longer controls us." So Alexander came up and gave a gentle pat. Samuel's cheek, I've shown all the proof. Her family would rather keep quiet after being fired from the company due to the scandal. Camila felt less chest, where a knot had been for so long that it had become ingrained in her. Maybe Maria was correct. It was time to start tearing down the walls. What are your opinions on Alexander's progress in gaining Camila's trust? Is he prepared for this commitment? Part 9. Building trust brick by brick. Eleanor's top-floor office. When Alexander arrived, the Thorn building was being vacated. Workers carried boxes under supervision, with Elena sitting behind. Despite the situation, her workstation remains attractive. While she was signing documents, she stated, "You came to gloat. I came to make sure you comprehend the message," Alexander remarked, shutting the door after him. "Remain away from my family." At last, Elena turned to face him, her flawlessly manicured lips forming a chilly smile. "Your family, the one you left behind for me, the one you led me to believe." Alexander put a folder with all the evidence of her manipulations on the desk after I left. Every edited image, every sent message, every terrifying threat. "And what did Eleanor was standing around the desk, and Camila had already forgiven you. Believes you." Alexander held on to his job. Despite Eleanor's constant, "I'm here to warn you not to do that," like a poisoned dagger. "You warn me. Dear, you haven't seen what I'm talking about." Eleanor laughed, but the sound was devoid of humor. Able to, however, if you approach Camila or Samuel Alexander, their voice falls to a potentially derogatory tone. "I'll ensure that every business in this nation is aware of your actual character, your vicious tactics, and do you believe that will deter me?" Eleanor moved closer with her potent scent, filling the void between them. "Alexander, you were always so innocent and simple to manipulate." "No more." Alexander retreated a step, and this time, I was ahead by one step. The door suddenly opened, and Elena's father came in, followed by "That's enough." Elena, Liam, Alexander's attorney. Her father's voice boomed with authority. "If you attempt to harm the Thorn family, the deal is signed." Elena's father will be visibly pale, and the repercussions will be immediate. Elena's father said, "You have my word, my daughter," turning to Alexander. "Will not meddle in your affairs once more." Alexander nodded and took the folder. "By the way, Eleanor," he said as he paused at the door before leaving the desk, turned one final time. "Samuel is flawless in the presence of my eyes and Camila's." Smile. Liam gave him the completed paperwork. "Eleanor will now be moved to Alexander's restraining injunction as part of the arrangement with the European branch." For the first time in weeks, he inhaled deeply as his phone vibrated, and he saw a message from Camila as holding a picture of Samuel dozing off with his toys. "Was it worth it?" Liam inquired, observing Alexander's face. Alexander grinned, and placed his phone aside. Now, the hardest portion was all that was left, restoring Camila's trust gradually, day by day, until the barriers between. Part 10, taking one step at a time to build a future until they ultimately fell apart. On a Sunday afternoon when the playground was nearly deserted, Camila observed from a bench as Alexander pushed Samuel's prom carefully while narrating stories to the infant, as though he was paying close attention to everything that was said. Alexander clarified his voice. "Your grandfather started this business from the ground up, gentle and understanding. If you wish Camila couldn't assist, it will be yours one day." But grin at the thought of Alexander and Samuel being so close just a month ago. It frightened her, but now it seemed normal to see them together, as though it had always been. Alexander sat next to her while Samuel slept. "So what are you thinking about?" Calmly in his prom, "How Eleanor the Kamaka has changed." Eleanor the Alexander, who works for us, gave her a serious but relaxed face. "What I mean is that Camila turned her head to face the park. How did you protect Samuel? It was the appropriate thing for you to confront Elena." And Alexander leaned forward, as if only I had noticed the warning signs, I would have done it sooner. Elbows on his knees, Camila thought of Samuel playing in the same park in a few years. As a group of kids ran by, their laughter filling the air. Maria claims that when Alexander teaches him to ride a bike, Dread might turn into a jail. Remembering what the director had said, Camila said, "What do you think I think?" Camila inhaled deeply, thinking that it was time to let Alexander in. Samuel turned to face her, his eyes gleaming with restrained joy. "Is he hungry?" they asked, as he started to stir in his pram, his small hands waving in the air. "Do you want to come home?" they both said simultaneously, then chuckled at the coincidence. Unexpectedly, Camila suggested, "We could have dinner together." He grinned and said, "I'd love that." As they made their way to the flat, as their movements synchronized organically, Camila sensed a change within herself. She believed that beams of light were entering through the widening gaps in the wall she had constructed around her heart. Camila Alexander paused in front of the structure to express gratitude for those who were lost forever. He pointed to Samuel and said, "You why for giving me the chance to be a part of this." Towards her when they first became a part of our family, the word family reverberated between them, full of possibilities and promises. Although Camila's heart was racing, it wasn't out for the first time in a long time. "Come on," she urged, merely keeping the door open out of fear. "Dinner won't make itself." As they made their way up the stairs, Alexander cautiously carried Samuel's. Camila permitted herself to see a possible world in which boundaries weren't part 11. Love's real home, the phone, where love triumphed over fear, rang round 3 in the morning, and Alexander woke up suddenly, realizing that Camila's voice has a high temperature, and Samuel has given Camila's calls a unique tone. He's breathing strangely and is trembling. The medication won't help. "I'm on my way," and Alexander was all ready as he spoke. He was getting ready. "Call emergency services, and I'll meet you at the hospital." Traffic lights and deserted streets filled the trip to Camila's flat. She was waiting at the doorway when he got there, holding Samuel, and the baby's face was red with fever. With her eyes sparkling with tears, Camila whispered, "The ambulance is on its way." Alexander embraced Samuel while crying, feeling the warmth radiating from his. The ambulance lights lit the street as the little body said, "Hey champ, daddy's here." Seconds later, Samuel's vital signs were continuously monitored by paramedics during the anxious hospital ride. Camila held onto Alexander's hand as though it were her sole source of stability. After assessing Samuel, the on-call pediatrician described bronchiolitis as typical for infants his age, but he will need to spend the night under observation. Samuel slept in a customized cot in the little yet private hospital room. Camila, who was hooked up to monitors, wouldn't leave his side as Alexander managed the administrative processes. "Alexander, you should take a little break." I couldn't get Camila to accept the coffee, but she shook her head when I recommended it, kept her eyes on Samuel, saying, "He's in good hands. Every time he closes his eyes, I get afraid." We're here, together, sitting next to her, our shoulders softly touching. As the hours went by, Samuel's temperature started to go down gradually, and his Camila's breathing eased towards daybreak, and she eventually passed off from tiredness. He observed the lines as he watched her sleep with her head lying on Alexander's shoulder, of concern on her face, as evidenced by the way she continued to reach for Samuel's cot, even in his dreams. He carefully took off her shoes and put his jacket over her. She cuddled closer and muttered, "Thank you," without opening her eyes. "What?" "For staying here and persevering." When Samuel woke up, the daylight was starting to peek through the window, and his eyes were brighter and more attentive. The pediatrician approved his discharge since he was happy with his improvement. Alexander remarked, "I'll take you home this afternoon," as they gathered their belongings. "Camila," she nodded, and her eyes were clear of doubt for the first time in a long time. Part 12. Trust and something else that neither of them had yet named. Alexander parked his car in front of the apartment building while we were building our house. Examining the tiny container within his jacket pocket for the third time following weeks of after much planning, he had at last discovered the ideal time. That day, the elevator worked miraculously. He brought him to the third floor, where he could hear Samuel laughing in the corridor. Camila answered the door with a warm smile on her face, and Samuel was struck by the music that had become his favorite melody of the day. "I have something for you," he said, scuttling across the living room after a melodic toy. Additionally, Alexander continued, stooping to lift Samuel, who tried to take his tie and say, "Can we talk?" Camila gave a nod, but Alexander saw a flash. Samuel was playing between them as they sat on the sofa, her eyes full of worry. "I'm incredibly thankful for the last few months. Camila Alexander, please let me continue." He pulled the tiny box out of his pocket, and it's not what you might imagine. There were 2 shining golden keys, Camila asked, grabbing one of the keys and raising her eyebrows. "I purchased my parents' house," and Alexander grinned at Camila's astonished expression. Camila traced the keys with her fingers in the place where I grew up and learned to walk. 10 minutes away from the shelter, Alexander is enthralled with their glimmer. He paused thoughtfully and said, "It has a huge garden with spacious rooms." "Alexander, we are unable to provide the greatest playroom a youngster could hope for." "There is no pressure," he gently interrupted. "It's an option. Samuel owns the house. It's in his name." Camila's eyes moved from the keys she was holding to Samuel, who was now peacefully dozing in his father's lap. "Why your parents' house?" "Since that's where Alexander's gentle strokes of Samuel's hair made Me very happy since I want our son to share in my amazing recollections, and because he inhaled deeply since it's the only location I can think of for our family's upbringing. Unaware of the pivotal moment taking place all around him, Samuel yawned. And then lastly, Camilla whispered, "It's yours if you ask for another key. Desire it." Alexander gazed into her eyes without any restrictions or pressure, the soul-enduring assurance that they will always be a family for taking the second key. Camilla's fingers brushed Alexander's. A familiar electric current was transmitted between them by the contact, uniting all they had ever been, having lost everything they could now regain. How do you feel about Alexander's impressive gesture? Is this the Camilla and Samuel deserve a happy ending? Please share your opinions below. Camilla recalled her parents' home as being both oppressive and inviting, with its big windows that let in the warm afternoon light and its stone walls. As with Samuel in her arms, she strolled through the deserted rooms as memories came flooding back to her like a soft wave. "This is where I met you," Alexander remarked, pausing at the main living room's entrance at the "You spilt punch on my dress." Camilla grinned at the company's Christmas party. "You lent me your jacket, and I have a recollection as clear as if it were yesterday." Alexander came over, his eyes gleaming with want. "You never gave it back to me." "Still have it." Samuel stirred in, and the confession came out almost like a whisper. "This will be your room champion," Camilla says, her arms reaching out to his father. Alexander unlocked a door that revealed a large room with a view of the garden. "When I was younger," Camilla noticed the faded murals of animals and forests that covered the walls that her father had painted for me. "The walls are lovely, and we can redecorate them." Alexander turned to her. The phrase "this space, our own" hung in the air, opposing the notion of trust. Once more of love, yet, in this home filled with memories and assurances, she fears felt lessened. "And Maria was correct," she said as she moved to a window. "Camilla, I was afraid that the back garden would turn into a jail." Alexander turned to face him. "I nearly missed the opportunity to be joyful because I've been so afraid of going through pain once more." Samuel was gently placed on the carpet, and the infant started exploring right away. "What do you think of Camilla's fear reflection, and how will this new home make him feel entirely content?"